The train. I'm back in these mountains I love once again. It's a clear, dark night and my window is open. I love the stillness and the smell of night. Cozy under my comforter, I hear the wail of the night train. My mind's eye follows as it passes where Beacon Manufacturing Company once stood, now only a memory of the larger family it created and of a village lost. It passes the women's prison and the Presbyterian home for children and on past the veteran cemetery. Close by, the whistle blasts again. Could that have been for me? On it goes, this night train, passing Black Mountain Depot and leaving town. The sound becomes faint, but I can hear it almost as it arrives in Ridgecrest, passes where the depot once was, and enters the tunnel. Back in the day, the depot was the heartbeat of the village. The middle of the tunnel marks an eastern point of the Continental Divide. Spring water flows east and west. The train crosses this geographical waypoint, maneuvers down windy tracks, and through 20 tunnels. It will pass the Geyser, Old Fort, and then rush east where the tracks flatten out. So many memories. My brother and I counted cars most afternoons, never agreeing on the right number, which was always about 100. When I was 8 or 9 years old, I remember watching a few longtime summer residents arrive by train as they'd been doing all their life. I watched the train fill up at the water barrel before it gliding into the tunnel. I remember the switchman. I remember the arrival of a missionary family. The father was recently released from a prisoner of war camp in China. The family had finally escaped and they were returning to their U.S. home. The whole community was a welcome committee. That day, I learned the meaning of the words starvation and prisoner of war. The family, a couple with 3 children, needed lots of assistance getting down from the car. They were very quiet, exhausted, beyond thin, ghost-like, weary and listless. I'd never seen people who looked like this, and I'd certainly never seen children who didn't act like children. I remember a collective gasp and silence draped over the crowd. I understood then the importance of the depot and its place in the history of this village. Hearing the night train, I even remembered about the headless man. Since we were not from around here, a neighbor had worked hard to convince me that a creature lived in the middle of the tunnel. I was very gullible back then. I was also 10. I was invincible. I stepped into the tunnel, alone, heart pounding. I completely understood this to be against all rules, even though I had never specifically been told, "Ann Carr, don't go in the tunnel." What would happen if I got caught? Or worse even, I suspected, if I were killed. What would Daddy think? Now, that was the yardstick by which all my deeds were measured. Could anyone live in the tunnel? Would they have a bed? Would they only be able to see in the dark? I was on a mission to find out. The middle of the tunnel was my goal, and I trudged the tracks, on and on. Listen, walking a railroad track on 10-year-old legs is not easy. Suddenly I stopped, unable to reach my goal, unable to move, stiff with fright. I had to go back. Could I make it before a train rushed in? I turned, knowing full well that I would never see the creature. Now at my back, he could easily overtake me at any time. I also knew there would be no safe place if the train should come. I made it to the water barrel, sunlight. Everything looked normal. Of course, everything was normal. Suddenly, what I had done was so cool, but insignificant. So insignificant, in fact, I never mentioned it at the supper table where everything in my family was discussed. In bed that night, I said to myself, no one could really live there. So the memories had rushed back as if it were yesterday. Plain as day, I saw my 10-year-old self in my corduroys. Well, very little changed. Chalking up another adventure, satisfied that this time there would be no church member rushing to tell Daddy what I had done before I could even get home. I was safe, just as I am now. And just like all those years ago, I listen for the night train and follow it to the tunnel.